So first of all, I want to apologize. I am battling a bit of a cold here, so please bear with me. So first I want to say hello and welcome. Today I will be walking through how I wrote a licensable hip-hop orchestral track. I'll show you the arrangement choices, sound selection, some of the instrumentations that I chose, and some key decisions I used to make this track licensable. Okay, so first I want to talk about the drums, percussion, and the low end. So in Act 1 is where I built the groove and the foundation. In this project, I ended up setting the tempo to 138 BPMs. To me, this was the sweet spot for driving a hip-hop orchestral track, at least for what I was going for. Though you can experiment depending on the vibe you want. I mean, you can start with tempo that fits the feeling you're going for, which faster equals more urgency and slower equals more weight. First, let's start with the kick and the snares. I used some kick and snare samples I found on Splice and ended up layering different types of samples on top of each other. I used a few different kick and snare samples, some with the solid low end and others with a bright high end snap. In my experience, layering gives the drum and snare hits character and presence, kind of like making them your own. Let me quickly play that kick and snare for you so you can hear what I'm talking about. Next, I created some percussion. I grabbed 2 to 3 percussion patterns that I had laying around in my drive that I chopped up, rearranged, and sliced them, and added some slight pitch shifting to them to make them a bit unique. Let me play that along with the rest of the drums so you can hear what I mean. And then, of course, I added some 808s for that low-end rumble. A quick side note, I like to sidechain my kicks and 808s by using a dynamic EQ, just to make space for the 808s or the kicks, depending on what you're going for. Now let me play the whole drum and percussion section together with the 808s. So on top of all the drum patterns I created, I also sprinkled in some cool synth plugs from Serum, along with a cool reverse pad I created to help set the tone, help it evolve, and keep it interesting. Let me just play the synth plugs with the pads real quick so you can have a listen. Okay, so then I added some orchestral drums using a sample library called Ferrum by Keep Forest. It's a really dope orchestral drum and hit library. I highly recommend checking them out if you haven't. But anyway, I used these drums to blend that cinematic feel with that hip-hop groove. Let me go ahead and play these orchestral drums along with the kicks, the snares, and the percussion so you can hear what I'm talking about. Okay, so in Act 1, I also introduced the primary melody using strings and began evolving the arrangement so it stays interesting. I brought in a viola playing a short staccatissimo motif with punchy notes that sit nicely within the track, and then added a string sustain section to keep it interesting using a 6-1-4-2 chord progression. Let me go ahead and play that string section for you. Also, I want to mention I found this really cool sample on Splice, Vocal Chop. I ended up processing it a bit, reversing it, adding some reverb and some more processing, and I really liked it, and I ended up using it as a riser. So let me go ahead and play that so you can hear what that sounds like. All right, now I'm going to play all of Act 1, the orchestral drums, along with the kick, snares, percussion, synths, pads, and elements, so you can hear what it sounds like when it all comes together. That will eventually lead to break 1. Before we move on, I want to point out that throughout the track, you will notice breaks in between each of these acts. If you want to know more about breaks and what they are, I highly recommend checking out my other video called How to Write Epic Trailer Music. In that tutorial, I gave a detailed description on what breaks are and why they are important to incorporate in your tracks regardless of genre. All right, for the first half of Act 2, I ended up removing the percussion to create contrast. This dynamic change keeps listeners engaged. But then for the second part of Act 2, I brought back the drums to bring back that energy. I also added a variation of Act 1 string melody. I layered a violin on top for brightness. Then I reversed the chord sustains from Act 1 into a pad-like texture. I used a whoosh for a smooth transition into break 2, and then I used a vocal chop that I sampled to build as a riser. This is all just a simple trick to make familiar chords feel new. Let me go ahead and play all of Act 2 so you can hear how it all comes together as I remove the percussion for the first part of Act 2 and then bring back restoring the energy in full force. Okay, so in Act 3, I wanted to pull back to create anticipation. I brought the energy down so the final act, Act 4, would hit harder. I stripped back the percussion and the drums, leaving only a cool variation of stringed staccatissimos, pads, the 808s, the synth plugs, and the orchestral drums. That emptiness gives the listener a preview that something bigger is coming, and that's what we want. I also want to mention that I left the pad that you just heard earlier running from Act 2 all the way to Act 4 just to keep the same tone. Let me go ahead and play Act 3 with all the instruments combined so you can hear what I'm talking about. Okay, so we finally arrived at Act 4. Act 4 brings everything together. The full orchestra, the extra brass power, and finally a stinger to end strong. For the first 8 bars, I keep the main melody, but added more ensemble staccatissimos with first and second violins, and bigger sustains for width. Let me go ahead and play this string section real quick so you can hear what I'm talking about. I also wrote a counter melody with French horns and low brass to add punch and some aggressiveness. Let me go ahead and play this section for you. Then I brought back the drums, but this time I added some subtle variations of that compared to Act 1, so it feels familiar but bigger. Let me play a little bit of that so you can hear what I mean. Finally, after the end of the climax of Act 4, I finished with a bold stinger to signal the conclusion, the finale, right? Let me go ahead and play all the instruments of Act 4 all the way up to the stinger so you can hear how epic it sounds once it's all played together. And lastly, let me play the stinger that I wrote for this track. In my case, if I want to submit this track to an editor or to a music library, editors love stingers. Stingers are gold to them. I mentioned this in my previous videos, so if you are writing a track for a production library, make sure you add a stinger. Let me go ahead and play the stinger that I wrote. So this was my version for a structural walkthrough of a hip-hop orchestral track. Tempo, layered drums, viola motifs, evolving string textures, strong brass melodies, synth plugs, and pads. This type of structure really helps make this type of track licensable. I know I didn't deep dive into the mixing and mastering today, but that's something I plan on doing in the near future. If you found this hip-hop orchestral breakdown useful, please like and subscribe. And please feel free to tell me in the comments section if there's anything else you would like me to cover for future videos. Can't wait to see you in the next one.